Good evening. This is Front Page by AIM Network. So, just last week, Nvidia made a move that didn't come with a flashy product launch but instantly changed the balance of power in AI hardware. Nvidia is paying $20 billion to secure Groq's breakthrough inference technology and, more importantly, to pull its founder, ex Google TPU architect Jonathan Ross, and most of Groq's core engineering team inside Nvidia. On paper, Nvidia isn't calling this an acquisition. It's actually a non exclusive licensing agreement plus talent transfer. In quote. Unofficially, though, it looks, smells, and feels like Nvidia just absorbed its most dangerous competitor in AI inference. Groq built the world's first language processing unit, LPU. The chips designed for extreme low latency, batch size 1 real time inference, and deterministic performance where NVIDIA GPUs struggle. While NVIDIA's GPUs dominate AI training, Groq went after the part of AI that decides how fast, how cheap, and how usable intelligence actually feels. Everything begins to run on inference. Chatbots, voice agents, co-pilots, autonomous tools, enterprise AI workflows, real-time assistance. Inference is actually where users feel AI in speed, cost, and reliability. NVIDIA's move here buys something more valuable than just speed. It buys control over uncertainty. Why pay three times Groq's last valuation? Why pay $20 billion in cash? Because the AI industry is undergoing what analysts call the inference flip. Until now, value is equal to training giant models. Now, value equals running them millions of times instantly, cheaply, and everywhere. Latency now shows up on balance sheets. Costs per token decides margins, and energy efficiency decides who can scale. Groq was delivering 300 to 500 tokens per second versus typical GPU, which is at about 100 tokens per second. Wow, that's huge. Nvidia simply decided if someone is going to disrupt us, well, it will be us. This deal sits in a gray zone, legally careful, strategically aggressive. Don't Nvidia didn't just buy Groq, didn't just merge with Groq, didn't take corporate control. Instead, Nvidia licensed all Groq technology. Nvidia hired the founders plus 80% of engineers. Groq, of course, remains alive with a new CEO operating Groq Cloud, but without its brain and its team. Critics are calling this, and I would like to start to read out, an acquisition in disguise, end quote. Regulatory evasion, engineering, end quote. A reverse acqui-hire, end quote. And even the creation of a zombie company, end quote. Groq investors celebrate. Employees, well, mixed emotions. Regulators watching very closely. The FTC already blocked Nvidia once with ARM. This time, Nvidia designed a deal that avoids regulatory freeze. Will it hold? Well, that's one of the biggest questions. Interestingly, this deal didn't just reshape the AI hardware landscape. It also created one of the biggest venture capital windfalls of the AI era. So back in 2018, Chamath, and I'm sorry if I get the pronunciation wrong, but I'm going to try my level best. Palihapitiya's, yes, social capital quietly bought around 20% of Groq. From now on, I will just call this gentleman Chamath, investing nearly $60 million at a time when Groq was just a bold bet with conviction and no guarantee of survival. Today, that early stake is now worth over $4 billion, delivering roughly 75 times a return. The kind of asymmetric payoff that defines Silicon Valley folklore. Chamath even revealed his original memo, which was predicting Groq could one day become a $100 billion company. And of course, sharing how he personally helped recruit the original Google TPU team that built Groq's DNA. So, whether or not Groq ever reaches that $100 billion mark, this deal proves something very important. In the age of AI, the real wealth is being created at the silicon layer, which is where deep tech, infrastructure, and national computing power all converge. So, this is also actually a venture capitalism masterclass in conviction, which is timing, patience, and betting on founders who built fundamental technology. Now, back to the deal. Groq and Nvidia represent two philosophies. Nvidia's GPUs, great for throughput, huge memory, designed for training, needs batching. Groq LPUs, designed for real time, SRAM on chip, deterministic execution, industrially predictable performance. So, if Nvidia integrates Groq technology into future chips, Rubin, Blackwell successors, hybrid architectures, we may see GPUs with ASIC like inference performance. CUDA seamlessly talking to LPU style execution. The best of both worlds under one empire. Meanwhile, AMD in its last few generations and upcoming GPUs have already recognized the importance of inference and is focusing on it very extensively. And Intel, well, after years of missing the AI bus, it has made its smartest recovery move yet, with reported talks of Samba Nova acquisition, another ASIC startup focusing on inference. So, what about the hyperscalers? Well, they were supposed to be Nvidia's great counterbalance. They built their own chips precisely to escape Nvidia's pricing power. AWS Trainium, Google TPU, Microsoft Maya. These were insurance policies. Nvidia has walked straight into their backyard, inference economics, and has said, we'll do low latency, low cost, and massive scale ourselves. Which means hyperscalers are no longer just customers. They are once again competitors, forced to prove that their in house silicon is worth continuing. Or, well, accept a world where Nvidia owns the factory and the future. We at Front Page have been covering every chapter of this journey, from Nvidia versus Google, Intel's comeback arc, to hyperscaler chip ambitions and Oracle's silent moves. Please go ahead and check out all of our previous coverage if you already haven't. We've, of course, got this entire story mapped so you never miss the bigger picture. Because what Nvidia has done here isn't just about chips or talent. It's actually about deciding who controls how AI runs, not just how it's trained. And that question is now firmly back on the table. And helping us understand the answer to that question, ladies and gentlemen, and more, is Supreet Kondinya, our very own tech journalist. Welcome to Front Page, Supreet. How are you doing?
Good evening, Sudhir. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing good. How are you? How are you doing?
Very well, as always, Supreet. It's always such a pleasure speaking with you. Let me kick this off with the starting question. What exactly is this deal first? And can we get to the specifics of that, please?
Well, I think it's it's just the kind of deal you'd want to have on a Christmas Eve. I my,
Correct.
my my favorite assessment was from the recent Axios report, which said that everyone makes a lot of money.
Right.
So let me just get into the specifics. So most of Grok's shareholders, are going to receive per share distributions of the reported $20 billion
Yeah.
valuation, and that's according to Axios. So everyone's going to make a lot of money. All the investors, Chamat, as you mentioned, is going to make a lot of money, and around 85% of it will be paid upfront, while the rest of the 10% is going to be paid mid of 2026, and the
Through the
remaining.
year, if I remember correctly, Supreet, because I had also gone through that report, am I right? All through
Yes.
2026.
Yep, all through 2026 is when all of these stocks are going to be are distributed. And for the employees, I think that's the key aspect here, because when you have the
That's
CEO
right.
joining another company, what happens to employees is the biggest question. So around 90% of Grok's employees are said to be joining Nvidia,
Hmm.
and they will be paid cash for all of their vested shares up front. And if you want to ask for
Wonderful.
the unvested shares, they're going to be paid out at the $20 billion valuation, and that's going to be paid via Nvidia stock that's going to further vest along with a schedule. And the report also mentioned that there are 50 members of the group, of the group of people who've joined Nvidia, whose entire stock packages are going to be like accelerated to be paid out in like full cash. And of course, you've got the remaining Grok employees, and of course, they're going to be paid for their
Yes.
vested shares, and they're going to receive all the packages. So all in all, so if you're just going to discuss purely of the economics of the deal, employees and investors are all cashing out well. They're going to have a
Yeah.
great, momentary, aspect with
My
this.
jaw has dropped, Supreet. वो हिंदी में कहते हैं ना सुप्रीत, चांदी ही चांदी. Of course, that's of course another story altogether. We don't
Right.
want to get into the silver aspect of things,
Right.
but yeah, that defines the sentiment perfectly. Which
Right.
actually brings me to this thought here, Supreet.
Hmm.
Why Groq? I mean, what didn't Nvidia already have? So why Groq?
Right. I think there are multiple aspects to it. The first one is, I think many people are asking, why didn't Nvidia make something like a Groq's LPU on itself? Look, I mean, Nvidia is constrained with a lot of resources with TSMC, and it was very unlikely throughout, if I'm not wrong, for them to invest on making an ASIC themselves. So down the line, they probably looked at acquiring, a company like a Groq and its hardware. That's the first aspect of it. You've got a lot of supply chain challenges. You wouldn't want Nvidia as a company to sort of diverge and build another piece of hardware themselves. Number two, as you mentioned on the surface level, Grok's LPU is fundamentally built for inference. The process meant you use ChatGPT to extract knowledge from a trained model. Now, Sudhi, if you look at what Grok specializes in, is that it has something called as a static RAM. So you've got the entire Grok silicon and you have the compute core on it. And on the same silicon is where your memory module is also integrated. As opposed to a GPU, where you have a compute core and around it, is where you have your memory modules, right? Now, the key aspect of it is memory, because if you look at inference is not a compute problem, it's a memory problem. For training you need a lot of compute, you need a lot of flops, which is floating point operations per second to train your model. But with inference it's a memory game, right? You need to fetch data from your prompt, fetch data from your model, and all of it needs to be done very quickly, for the end user. Let's take a look at how GPUs behave in this way, right? When you have memory modules around the compute components, it's going to take a lot of time for the memory to travel and then reach the end process. And
Fair enough.
think of it like a hub and spoke model, right? But we look at Grok's LPUs, everything is streamlined. The data doesn't need to travel as far as it does on a GPU during the process of inference. So it's much faster. The latency is again much lower, and memory travels much quickly because the memory module, as I repeat, again, that's the core functionality
Yeah.
here. It's integrated, built on the same silicon as your compute course. So that's the key differentiation here, and that's why the Groq's LPU does a really good job when it
Right.
comes to inference. Think of it like an assembly line. So I mean, you've got
Understood.
yeah, you've got everything on one single line. It's
Yeah.
deterministic, as you mentioned. I think that's one of Grok's key principles out there. Everything is pre-programmed. Everything is like very predictable. Your tokens go into in a very sequential manner to the end user, versus a GPU that requires a lot of complex orchestration between your HBM modules and the compute cores. Simply put, memory being very close to compute is precisely what does the magic for Grok's LPUs.
Understood. So basically, memory being the key and the
Exactly.
core aspect of it, they've hit at
Yep.
the heart of that
Exactly.
with this
Yep.
particular acquisition. And obviously, in the process, Supreet, I
Hmm.
have to say this, the employees are definitely making some great memories.
Of course.
Anyway,
Wow. Okay. I didn't see that coming. But again, talking to you, I did see that coming. I'm not surprised. But
fair. But what does this mean for NVIDIA's stack, though, Supreet?
that's I think one of the more interesting aspects out there. Today there's
Hmm.
Blackwell, right? Of course, the funny part, I wouldn't say funny, the interesting part is there's
Hmm.
no announcement from Nvidia yet. Not sure what this is for, but we clearly it's not fair to speculate what Nvidia is doing right now. But there are many analysts. I think Gavin Baker, he put out recently that, let's say you mentioned Rubin, the generation of hardware
Yeah.
that's called after Blackwell. Now let's take a look at what is expected out of Rubin. Number one, you have okay. Let me just take a step back and uh, tell you two aspects of there. One is training and one is inference, right? So for
Yeah.
training, you're gonna have your Rubin style GPUs that have all of your memory modules, the HBMs. They're gonna be really good for training. And then you have inference. Now, inference is
Hmm.
basically a two-step game. You have something called as prefill, which is gonna fetch all the data from your prompt, and then it's the second step of it is called as decode, right? Where you analyze the prompt, you're going to do whatever it takes to get you the right output, and in the process of decode, you're going to give the output to the end user. Now, let's take a look at the second class of hardware that Nvidia is expected to put out with the Rubin. It's called the Rubin CPX, right? Now, this Rubin CPX is somewhere in the middle between GPU and something like an ASIC like Groq. It's really tailor made for this process called prefill, and that's exactly where we're gonna picture Rubin CPX come on.
Hmm.
And then with the Groq's asset acquisition, I'm gonna be very careful with words here.
Yeah,
You,
yeah.
you can expect something like a Groq's LPU hardware on a Rubin style, system that's
Ah, okay.
precisely built for the decode aspect of it, right? So you have Rubin GPU, the top layer. That's the workhorse of it. It's going to do all of your training, the heavy load, compute intensive stuff.
Hmm.
Then
Hmm.
you're going to have the two hardware classes where you have the Rubin CPX doing the first part of inference, and then you have a Rubin style hardware with Groq's components in it that's going to carry the most low latency demanding activity, which is fetching the output in the fastest time possible for the end user. So that's
Fair.
where we sort of speculate. Not just me, many analysts sort of speculate Nvidia's roadmap with Rubin. Some say that we can see a Groq's hardware coming into Nvidia stack after
Hmm.
Rubin, which is the
Hmm.
Feynman series of hardware systems. Again, it's very easy and fun and games to speculate sitting here,
Yeah.
but until Nvidia decides to tell us what their roadmap is going to be, I think
We
it's
can
gonna,
just
yeah,
keep
we can.
speculating till the cows come home.
There's,
But
there's
honestly,
endless
the way you explained it, Supreet, looks like a fabulous evolution ahead as far as the Nvidia stack is
wide.
concerned.
Yeah. We're
Which
living in
brings me
wide.
to the competitors, Supreet. What does it
Yeah.
do to somebody like a, let's say, a Cerebras and a Samba Nova?
Right. So I think before we even get into Cerebras or a Sambanova, you look
Hmm.
at Groq as a company throughout the years.
Hmm.
Their identity was to compete against GPUs for inference. Right now,
Hmm.
it's even fair to call GPUs as a competitor for something like a Groq. And now these are both part of the same company. So let's take a look at how Groq's hardware is now going to compete with Nvidia's GPUs itself. And this reminds me of one quote or something that Jonathan Ross, the CEO of Groq,
Hmm. Hmm.
who's now the chief systems architect at Nvidia, said in a
Right.
podcast. He said training should only be done on GPUs. And remember, this is when he was competing Groq as a competitor to Nvidia on inference. He said that I think Nvidia will sell every single GPU that they're gonna make for training. Right? Let's be very
True.
clear right here. Many people are saying what's gonna happen for GPUs. You're gonna
Hmm.
have Groq now part of Nvidia, Cerebras, Samba Nova existing independently, or even TPUs.
Fair.
Nvidia will sell every GPU they make for training. It's a very compute intensive task,
Yep.
and you mentioned in your explanation earlier, you got in
Yeah. Yeah.
voice AI, agentic AI, chatbot,
True.
this that. You have more inference. That also means more training. So GPUs are going to sell, but Ross also said that in internal experiments at Groq, combining a Groq's hardware as a nitro boost to GPUs. As an
Nice.
extension of GPUs, worked really well. So Nvidia is going to have a really fun time playing around with what LPUs can do along with GPUs. So that's always going to be there. Nothing's going to happen
That
for the,
is, yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you're gonna buy GPUs, get every single one you can, is what he told. But let's take a look at what Samba Nova and Cerebras are doing.
Cerebras, right.
Yeah, essentially, I think we've had Andrew Feldman on the show. Very ambitious project with Cerebras, much
Hmm.
targets much higher scale workloads compared to Groq. It also supports training. They have the wafer scale engine out there. Supports much larger models compared to Groq
He,
in
of
terms of
course, if I
models.
remember, Supreet, when I'd spoken with him,
Yeah.
since you mentioned the gentleman, Andrew,
Mm.
he spoke about the fact that speed
Yeah.
was what they sell to the world, and
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
pioneers of it. Anyway, I
Exactly.
just thought I'll add to
Yeah,
that.
exactly. I think it's worth reminding that because today it's a very rare but a very heartwarming sight that Andrew Feldman actually put out a tweet saying Nvidia buying Groq's assets is a huge validation to
Yep.
their business as well. Because now
Hmm.
this is your world's largest market cap company acknowledging the entire thesis of Cerebras. I mean, not that Cerebras wanted
Yeah.
an external validation, but you got to look at how the market thinks and moves. So again, Cerebras is doing the wafer scale engines. They also support training models, unlike Groq, especially for inference.
Hmm.
They recently raised like $1 billion of funding at an $8.1 billion valuation.
Yep.
They plan to go for an IPO, but due to a few issues, they sort of pulled out, and they're going to target it next year. But they're out there. It's going to be really interesting to see how they're going to position their hardware now that Groq is a part of, Nvidia.
Nvidia.
And the interesting part is we don't know what Groq is up to with its second generation of hardware. And I'm sure if
Yeah.
Nvidia is doing a $20 billion deal, they've had a sneak peek, they've had a preview of
Oh, I'm
what the
pretty
second
sure.
or third generation hardware of Nvidia's, and that probably would have blown Jensen Huang's mind,
Yeah.
up. And once the world also knows what Groq's vision is, Cerebrus obviously needs to recalibrate its entire model, or maybe not. I think they're doing really well, highly valued, raising a lot of funds. And of course, you got Samba Nova, right? Supports again a variety of
Hmm.
workloads built for enterprise AI workloads with inference. They are reportedly in early talks with Intel for an acquisition. A really interesting point that you also mentioned: Intel was left out in the AI race for
Yeah.
long
Yeah.
to a crisis. Liput out there. It's interesting what they're going to do with Samba Nova if the acquisition is going to happen. But again, until Nvidia, two things: until Nvidia decides what they're going to do with Groq, until we know what Groq is up to with their next generation of
Yeah.
hardware, it is going to be likely that these two companies are going to recalibrate their hardware offerings. But yeah, I think
But
wait.
also, Supreet, maybe, I mean, what I could take away from that was also the fact that they need to be waiting and watching, but obviously being very, very cognizant about what's shifting, what's happening all across.
I am 100%, dude. I think word moves quickly within the industry. I'm sure
Sure.
it's very wild to speculate out here. Perhaps
But I'm
Intel.
pretty sure you never know, Supreet. They might already be kind of aware in terms of what the whispers are and all of those factors, which you and I are
Of course.
insulated from.
I mean, if Intel is looking to acquire someone, or probably they heard, they eavesdropped somewhere and got to know. I don't know, man. It's fun to
Yeah,
speculate out, but
but
yeah,
yeah, this deal definitely has gotten everyone chirping and
of
wondering
course,
what's going on. Of
definitely.
course, is this move fundamentally also about countering Google's TPU, Supreet? Because, well, Ross is
Mhm.
from Google's TPU team anyway.
Right. Right. He is. I think that's the biggest factor out there. I think as Chamath calls, Jonathan Ross, the father of the TPU project,
Hmm.
because you look at the TPU revolution out there. If there's one man that Google can credit, again, including its wonderful team, is Jonathan Ross. He was the
Hmm.
early, hardware guy behind TPUs, started the entire revolution, and you've seen how talent is poached quickly around
Yes, true.
build the TPUs to Nvidia.
Very valid point, Supreet. Yeah.
It's and it's very fair that Nvidia TPUs have sort of disturbed Nvidia because uh, Anthropic now again, first thing first, Google has always been using TPUs to train and deploy its Gemini family of models. We've seen it with 1.5, we've seen it in 2.5 now, even with the 3 and the 3 Pro. The 3 Pro and the 3 Flash, they've all been trained and deployed on the Google family of TPUs, and
Hmm.
this is one of the best models out there. And if some of the best models out there today is trained on a non-NVIDIA GPU,
Hmm.
and NVIDIA again is like probably the torchbearer of the AI revolution. If
Sure.
there's the best model of today is not trained on GPUs, I'm sure that's going to shake up their
Oh,
entire
yes.
thought process. And besides that, now Google has decided we're going to sell TPUs to via the cloud to the competition.
Hmm.
Anthropic, long time user of TPUs, expanded its TPU usage this year. It 1 million TPUs and to bring 1 gigawatt of compute. And Broadcom is out there revealing it's got $21 billion of orders from Anthropic to fetch Google TPUs. And all of these developments, along with, of course, Meta reportedly entering discussions to start using TPUs for their models,
Hmm. Hmm.
all of these discussions led to a slight dip in the market cap of Nvidia, and even the company issued a statement saying, we respect Google's commitment, but
Yeah, yeah.
there we're doing the best hardware. There's no competition for us, and so this is obviously going to be a hedge and a move to battle it out against TPUs. Ross is out there. He knows the trade secrets. Hopefully,
I
they're going to
think, yeah,
inference
I
chips.
think for me, Supreet, what you mentioned right at the top
Hmm.
made a hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah,
That it is probably a lot of it just to hedge somebody
exactly.
as brilliant and as a shining jewel as Ross
Yeah.
himself.
And just
Which
just
finally,
yeah,
sorry,
just
you were saying.
I think the reader should know this. I think I watched a lot of interviews of Jensen Huang on YouTube. He
Hmm.
has dissed every ASIC project out there. Of course, not he didn't take names, but he said that all ASICs projects, most of them are going to fail. Most of them
Hmm.
not going to come to light. and most of them shouldn't even be bought if offered free. If I heard it correctly, and but
Hmm.
he's always been super positive about Google TPUs. He said Google's an exception. Google's done great, and there we have it. He's hired the father of TPUs to work with him. I think that's
Yeah,
that's the biggest sign out there.
says volumes. Which
Yeah.
finally brings us to this towards the end of the discussion today,
Mm.
Supreet. Uh, I would love your thoughts on what about the antitrust angle to this,
Yeah.
and how is that playing out given the amount of chatter, as you and I have just clearly established, that there
Right.
is about this?
Right, dude. I think this is a quasi or a pseudo acquisition, as people call it. And
Yep.
when you say, Groq's competitor to Nvidia, $6.9 billion of valuation, not a small company. You want to buy the company outright, you're in trouble with the FTC, and you got the Hart-Scott-Rodino regime in the United States, which says that you got to do a lot of filings and antitrust details that you need to produce to the US government to ensure that you're not going to disturb the competition. And this kind of a deal is something that big tech companies have taken before, where you don't just buy the entire company remains
Hmm.
independent. You buy their assets in a non-exclusive license, you buy their CEO, you buy the biggest brains behind it. And we've seen
Hmm.
it with Meta and Scale AI, Nvidia itself with Mellanox, Amazon Graphco, then you also have Google and Windsurf. But this kind of acquisition makes sense most for Nvidia, because they've seen it in the past. They know
Yep.
that their entire acquisition of ARM was blocked a few years ago for
Yep.
40 billion. FTC said that this is foundational tech. You can't just buy a company out there.
Hmm.
Even like subtle influence can reshape the entire competition.
Sure.
Meta and within the health whatever tech company was acquisition was blocked. Microsoft and Activision acquisition was blocked. So it makes sense for Nvidia to make a pseudo acquisition like this. But is it to say that they're going to be fully safe? Absolutely not. Because let's take a look at Microsoft's pseudo acquisition of Inflection
Hmm.
AI last year. They paid
Hmm.
50 million. Inflection remained independent. They hired the CEO and sort of licensed their entire AI models. But what
But
happened is that
just for
FTC's
the viewers also, just to recalibrate on this and refresh their memories, so is this deal, Supreet, as you just mentioned, they're
exactly.
open to hire. Yeah.
Exactly. I think, yeah, they license the assets, CEO is hired. But what happened in Microsoft and Inflection AI's case was soon after the deal, FTC
Hmm.
began scrutinizing it, the Federal Trade
Ah.
Commission of the United States. It said that what if this was a move to evade your mandatory
Hmm.
antitrust review that was pertaining to the Hart-Scott-Rodino regime? And
Right.
as far as I know, there's no further development on that case, but Nvidia's got to be really careful with what they put out, if I'm not wrong. And this by no
Yes.
means safeguards the entire thing. We've seen FTC is really careful in this kind of a market that we've not seen before at all. Record breaking market cap valuations, record breaking private money, a lot of competition. They're going to be extra careful. So, yeah, I think until Nvidia,
Hmm.
like, we're not going to know what it's going to be like. So, yeah, we got to keep our eyes open.
But of course, as Supreet had mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, right at the top, it's been a great Christmas
Definitely.
for all the employees. Of course,
Definitely.
this time we're going to do it a little differently.
Mhm.
For all of you out there who haven't read Supreet's articles, please do read them. Supreet is the one who's authored this one as well on the AIM magazine. So please catch hold of it, get hold of it. It is going to be a fabulous new year ahead for Nvidia, clearly. Of course, they are going to be very, very gingerly in terms of how do they keep breaking this information to the FTC, or for that matter, everyone at large. But as I mentioned, we're doing it a little differently today. Supreet, I'd like your front page take on this one, really quick.
Right. I think my take in one word is I'm surprised as a journalist, and I didn't see this coming. One, on a Christmas Eve, and two, this is Nvidia's largest M&A activity at 20 billion. Like Groq valued at 6.9 billion in their September funding round. That's like around three times the valuation. Nvidia
Hmm.
buying an ASIC startup, a company that's like been so confident upon GPUs. It sort of ends the debate of Cerebras, Samano, and Groq. What is their position in the market? Look, Nvidia has answered it. They value speed. They spent a lot of money.
Sure.
Really exciting times to see what Nvidia is going to do. And this is market concentration. I can see that happening, right? Jonathan
Right.
Ross, many of you I'm sure know, he's a visionary by all means. I'm not under, it's no understatement. he's the chief software architect like me and you. He updated his LinkedIn bio, so I'm really excited to see what he's going to do with Nvidia. I think I'm surprised and excited. There's one of those deals that sort of
That's now 3 words.
yeah, that's
You
three.
started with 1 word.
Yeah,
All right. So, well, Supreet, as always, it's a true pleasure having you on Front Page.
only a
And,
Sujit.
ladies and gentlemen, please go ahead and get hold of a lot of the stuff that Supreet writes out. It's a lot of exciting stuff. Of
And
course,
listen to the every evening on AM network. Don't forget
we don't we don't believe in cross advertising each other at all here. I just
the
wanted to
same
put that out
company.
there. As always, Supreet, wonderful, wonderful speaking with you. And I believe you shed a lot of light on this deal. And yes, for sure, as you had it from Supreet, as you have it from us here on Front Page, definitely a great year ahead for all of the employees for sure in terms of this deal. And don't know as such in terms of how the strategy will play out, because as Supreet has mentioned very clearly, these times are exciting but also require a little bit of a wait and watch. But what you need to keep doing is to keep watching Front Page on the AIM network. Of course, it's time to say goodbye. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM.